The old house stood alone, a silhouette against the gray, unforgiving sky. Once grand, now a husk, a monument to forgotten glory. Inside, Mac moved like a ghost, haunted not by specters, but by silence. Each room was a study in decayed, dust-covered furniture, cobwebbed portraits with eyes that followed. Mac rarely spoke. What was there to say to emptiness? He wandered the halls, a restless spirit in a tomb of memories that weren't his own. The mansion whispered stories of lives lived and lost. Whispers snagged on the edges of his sanity. He was a prisoner in his own gilded cage. The silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Deep within the mansion, a grandfather clock stood sentinel. Its polished wood and bone-white face were relics from a forgotten age. Yet, it filled Mac with unease. He avoided the room, but the clock's hypnotic tick-tock drew him back. It was a beacon, a constant reminder of time's relentless march. Compelled by a force he couldn't explain, he'd stare at the hands, frozen in their dance. The clock was a harbinger, a herald of something sinister lurking just beyond reality, something that whispered his name on the edge of sleep. He just didn't know it yet. Night fell upon the mansion like a shroud. Shadows twisted familiar shapes into grotesque parodies. The silence now throbbed with anticipation. Mac felt a prickling dread beneath his skin as he paced the halls. His heart hammered, each footstep echoing in the stillness. He tried to reason with the fear, but deep down, he knew better. The air felt charged, the mansion holding its breath. His gaze was drawn down the long, dark hallway toward the grandfather clock. He stood before the door, a solid oak barrier between him and his dread. His hand hovered over the tarnished handle, trembling. The clock face glowed in the darkness, hands inching closer to the mark. The air grew heavy, thick with the metallic scent of ozone. The temperature plummeted, sending a shiver down Mac's spine. Then it began. The chime. A low, resonant tone vibrated in his bones. It wasn't the sound that terrified him, but what it heralded, a tearing of the veil between real and unreal. The chime echoed, clawing at his sanity. He was caught in its web, unable to run. The world seemed to distort, reality blurring at the edges. Shadows danced violently, writhing with a life of their own. The air crackled, a low hum growing until it filled his being. Pressure built, something trying to break through. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The world tilted, senses overloaded, vision swimming. Then, in a blink, everything stopped. The chime faded, leaving a ringing silence. He was no longer alone. The silence after the chime pressed on Mac's ears. He was no longer in the hallway. He was on the mansion roof, the ground a dizzying drop below. Panic seized him, but his body refused to obey. A cold wind whipped at him, urging him closer to the edge. Then he saw himself, standing a few feet away, back turned. This other Mac was calm, almost serene. Mac wanted to scream a warning, but his voice was gone. He was a spectator in his own nightmare, forced to watch as his other self took a slow, deliberate step forward, into the abyss. The fall was agonizingly slow. Mac watched as his other self plummeted toward the ground. He braced for impact, but there was no pain. He simply watched, detached, as his lifeless body came to rest. He was both observer and observed, trapped in a grotesque tableau. Then the world dissolved. Mac shot up, gasping for air. He was back in the hallway, the grandfather clock ticking before him. His heart hammered, breath ragged. He stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. The phantom sensation of falling lingered. The memory of his own broken body was seared into his mind. He pressed against the wall, searching for answers, but there was nothing. Just the clock, its ticking a morbid metronome. He was trapped, condemned to relive his death again and again. He staggered to his feet, legs shaky. He had to get out, away from the clock, away from the house. He ran, but the echoing chime and dread clung to him. The mansion held him captive, a prisoner in his own hell. It wasn't a dream. It was a premonition, a glimpse into the abyss that awaited him, and he knew it would happen again. The clock had shown him one death. What horrors awaited in the next loop? The countdown had begun. Days blurred into nights. Mac moved through the mansion like a wraith, eyes hollow. Sleep, once an escape, was now torment. He'd wake in a cold sweat, the echo of the chime ringing in his ears. Each death, more vivid and terrifying than the last. He began to document his deaths, scribbling frantic notes on scraps of paper. Dates, times, the manner of each demise. He plastered them on the walls, a macabre tapestry of mortality. The mansion, once a prison, was now his only sanctuary. He was tethered to it, bound by a force he couldn't comprehend. He tried to rationalize it, sleep paralysis, maybe just a vivid imagination, but the certainty of each death gnawed at his sanity. He became obsessed with the clock, its tick-tock the rhythm of his nightmare. He'd sit for hours, watching the hands move with morbid fascination. He tried changing his routine, staying awake past 2:17, sleeping in different rooms. But it was no use. The chime always found him, dragging him back to the precipice of death. His mind began to fray at the edges. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. He saw shadows move, heard whispers in the night. He was unraveling, thread by thread. Desperation clawed at him. He considered fleeing, but a chilling certainty held him back. It wouldn't matter. The clock would follow. He saw it now for what it was, the architect of his torment. Rage surged through him. He smashed the clock's face, splintering wood and shattering glass. The chime sputtered and died. Relief washed over him. He had won. He collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. He would burn the remains, scatter the ashes. He would be free. He slept, soundly, dreamlessly. He woke to dawn's weak light, feeling almost normal. The terror had receded, replaced by cautious hope. He would clear the debris, erase the nightmare. But as he entered the room, he stopped dead. The grandfather clock stood there, untouched. Its surface gleamed, hands ticking with a steady rhythm. The time was 2:16. 1 minute to go. The clock chimed, reverberating through his soul. The nightmare had only just begun. The mansion was now filled with mirrors, shards reflecting fractured images. Each one held a different version of himself, a prisoner in its own right. He'd catch glimpses, hollow eyes, blistered skin, twisted necks. He tried to avoid them, but their pull was magnetic. Each reflection was a horrifying reminder of the clock's torment. The line between real and reflected blurred. Doubt gnawed at his sanity. Were these reflections figments of a fractured mind or glimpses into alternate realities? He began to question his own identity. Which Mac was real? The one before the mirror or one of the countless reflections? The fear became a constant companion, a voice whispering of his fragility. He was a puppet, dancing to the clock's morbid tune. The mansion itself seemed to react to my deteriorating state, as if it was somehow aware of my growing fear and confusion. The walls, once just decaying, now seemed to, pulsate, to breathe, as if the house itself was alive and watching me, its heartbeat echoing through the halls. The shadows danced more violently, twisting into grotesque shapes that mocked my terror, their forms shifting and writhing with every flicker of light, as if they were feeding off my panic. The air grew thick, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes, every breath I took feeling like it was being watched, measured, and judged. I felt constantly watched, hunted by something I couldn't see but could feel closing in on me with every passing moment, a presence that seemed to grow stronger the more I tried to ignore it. The mansion, once my prison, was now an active participant in my torment, a sentient entity feeding off my fear, twisting the very air and space around me to heighten my dread. I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape, the lines between reality, death, and madness blurring into a terrifying, inescapable hole, each step forward only deepening my sense of hopelessness. I ran, my bare feet pounding on the cold stone floors, each echoing footstep a testament to my desperation, the sound ricocheting off the walls like a warning I couldn't ignore. But honestly, there was nowhere to run. Every doorway led to another dead end, every corridor stretched on forever, looping back on itself. The mansion was a labyrinth, its corridors twisting and turning, leading me in circles, always back to the chilling presence of the grandfather clock, its relentless ticking echoing like a countdown to my unraveling. The air crackled with a familiar energy, thick and electric, as if the very walls themselves remembered every moment that had come before. A cold sweat clung to my skin, each droplet a reminder of the countless times I'd stood here, trapped in this endless nightmare. I knew, with a certainty that justified logic, that this was it. The final loop, the last chime, the moment everything would either end or begin again. I stood before the grandfather clock, my reflection a specter in its polished surface. I looked resigned, defeated. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope struggled to survive. The fear was still there, but it was a dull ache now, a constant companion that, honestly, no longer held any power over me. I had grown used to its presence, almost numb to its sting. The clock chimed, once, twice. Each note seemed to hang in the air, vibrating through my bones. The sound echoed through me, but this time, there was no shift, no tearing of the veil. The world held steady, refusing to unravel. I waited for the familiar terror to grip me, for the world to dissolve into another gruesome death. But it didn't come. The silence was almost deafening. I was still there, in the room, the clock ticking steadily before me. I had survived. For the first time, I felt the weight of possibility. I had broken the cycle. The endless repetition was finally over, or so it seemed. A wave of relief, so profound it threatened to drown me, washed over me. I could finally breathe, as if waking from a long, suffocating dream. I was free. Or was I? The question lingered, heavy and unresolved as the mansion held its breath around me. A sound, barely audible at first, cut through the suffocating silence of the mansion. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. A soft, rasping breath. It was unmistakable, coming from behind me, chilling the air even further. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins, every muscle locked in place by a terror I had never known before. I was not alone. Slowly, with dread building inside me, I turned, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic drum, echoing in my ears. My eyes widened in terror. Standing in the doorway, shrouded in shadow, was a figure, its presence overwhelming, almost suffocating. Tall, skeletal, its features obscured by darkness, it seemed to absorb the faint light around it. It was watching me. The figure took a step forward, and I saw its eyes, cold, unblinking, and ancient. They glowed with an unnatural light, two pinpricks of malevolent intelligence in the darkness, burning with a hunger that felt endless. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My voice was trapped, strangled by fear. I was paralyzed, caught in the grip of an ancient, unspeakable terror that seemed to seep from the very walls. The figure glided closer, its movements fluid, almost serpentine, as if it floated just above the floorboards. It reached out a hand, long and skeletal, towards me, fingers stretching impossibly far, as if to claim me. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable, every nerve in my body screaming in anticipation. The touch never came. I opened my eyes, heart still racing, and looked around in disbelief. The figure was gone. The room was empty, save for me and the ancient grandfather clock, its presence now more ominous than ever. The clock chimed again. This time, it was different, deeper, more resonant, as if the sound itself carried a warning. Deeper, more resonant, as if somehow something else was chiming along with it, echoing through the empty halls and into my soul.